Welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. I hope everyone is well. I don't actually know when this is going to be released. I'm thinking the other one we said, I hope you had a great Christmas. So this must be in the new year now, even though we were recording this also before Christmas and the new year. Although this is Christmas Eve today. So happy Christmas Eve to us and whatever day it is for the listeners. So how are things on your end, Pascal? I was just going to say, off air, you're deloading now, right?
Yeah, I'm deloading, and it's all right. I mean, I have the feeling that just my entire body is getting older. That the injuries and things that creep up throughout the mesocycle are not really dissipating any longer, which is a little bit unfortunate. But I think that this is what many people are then talking about when they are getting older and saying like, okay, I simply don't feel that like I'm recovering as fast as I've done in the past. And it's such a gradual process because I always thought like, yeah, okay, let's take a deload and then I'm feeling fresh again. But there are just a couple of things that never truly go away. And yeah, it's also just being stuck at home, kind of. Yeah. I mean, I'm still allowed to go out, but thing is, nothing is outside. I mean, I'm still going out on, I don't know, walks with my family and stuff when they're at home. But right now, they're still going to the kindergarten. I'm still sitting at home and working. And now it's just, I don't know, I'm experiencing headaches like since like 2 weeks, like chronic headaches each and every single day. And I don't know whether it has to do that I'm sitting just in that little corner here the entire day, not getting in enough of vitamin D, for example, and just sitting in front of the screen just the entire day without any kind of changes in my day-to-day business, which then kind of drags me down as well. It makes me kind of sad as well at times.
You do have a SAD light, don't you? Seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I think I got the one like you do as well.
It's just, like, it looks like an iPad or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is sitting behind my monitor though, so it's not really shining into my eyes. Does it need to be directly into your eyes to make an effect? No,
I would imagine it needs to be relatively close. I'm not sure. I don't know. But it's 10,000 lux, isn't it? So that should help at least. But and then supplement wise, are you taking vitamin D at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So. But I guess there's nothing like the real D.
No.
And getting outside.
The real D is always the best.
So, oh man, that sucks. And I guess, but deloading always brings those sort of thoughts and feelings, I find, especially for people I've had clients who, there's just a certain type of client, I think, who's heavily, and not to say that all my clients aren't heavily invested, but like ones, they just have this kind of nature about them where they start overthinking things like I do, like every deload. I your cup said, I love PP.
True.
I was like, what does that stand for? It just distracted me.
I think it's the brand, which I don't want to give credit for now. No, I can easily do that.
Papa Pascal.
Protein Project. Yeah. As always, kind of a normal merchandise gift that you're always getting when you're ordering something. I have so many shake-up bottles at home. It's unbelievable.
Sorry, audience. I got completely distracted by the PP. I don't know why. But yeah, I think a deload, because you just get that wave of fatigue. You kind of feel a bit lethargic. Sometimes it allows you to feel some of the niggles that you maybe had been ignoring during hard training. And it gives you time to just overthink things. And I also wonder if there's like a weird hormonal shift because that stress is really high and then you're not doing anything and you just feel like a bit almost not depressed, but some sensations of that. And think life just doesn't feel as grand as it used to.
No, and that's also something that is right now reflected in my libido as well. It's not really as well as you would imagine it to be in the peak of an off season. So I would very much assume that I'm just like, I don't know, probably it has something to do with just sitting in front of the screen in that small dark corner here. For the majority of the day, and just doing the same stuff each and every single day. It's just at times it just gets, I wouldn't say boring, but that mundane sensation when it comes to I have no problem with doing the same thing over and over again, right? But when it comes to, of course, just getting up in the morning and work, that's basically all you're doing. Is that then the purpose of life, right? These kind of things. Yeah, don't know.
Pascal, you have a family though, so at least like literally that's my day, is like I get up, train, work. I mean, at least you have them to distract you.
That is definitely the highlight of my day.
Yeah,
honestly. And I have the feeling that because I'm now getting better and better, and also taking the weekends off and just not work. There was a long time where I just like was working 7 days out of the week, and right now I can't do that. I can't. I'm mentally not capable of doing so. It just drags me down, probably because I can't go to the gym, which always has been my catalyst for these kind of things. Just getting out of the house will do something else, right? And there's no end in sight. I mean, in January, the gyms won't reopen in Germany. No chance.
I was going to say that's one of the big, like, I realized that after the first lockdown, I was thinking, oh yeah, I want a home gym. And I think I mentioned it before. And then as soon as the gyms open, I was like, man, it's so much better to be out of my home environment and be in a gym. I much prefer that to actually just being in the, especially because you are the same as me. You train in the same room, you work in the same room. And so you're literally in that room all day. And it's just like, this starts wearing on you. And for the listeners, we've just gone into, well, the southern parts of England have gone into tier 4. And so tier 3 have their gyms open, but tier 4 means kind of gyms are shut, hairdressers are shut. It's literally just supermarkets. So I'm very similar to you that there is no reason to leave the flat unless I'm walking Ada, and then it's the same walk every single day. It's not like there's different walks I can do. There's not like there's a nice forest nearby. It's just walking by the river, the Thames every single day. So yeah, it does get a little bit monotonous, and you start like questioning life.
Yeah, and especially when you are always, it's kind of feeling as if it's a cage, and you can't. Or sometimes you're allowed to go outside, but only for like an hour or so, right? And everything is just like inside these 4 walls. It's not just 4 walls, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
And that is just, I don't know, a little bit depressing at times. Don't know, always found that the gym is always giving me a little bit of a change throughout the day. That is right now missing a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. It's once again complaining on a high level, but of course it does drag me down. It impacts me, and I don't need to pretend as if it isn't or doesn't impact me just because other people have it worse than I have.
Yeah, no, I think so. I guess on brighter news, I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about, because I didn't follow it. I followed it a little bit. I don't follow the whole process very, very closely, but the Olympia, which I think we both saw some highlights at least. And I was just watching some videos this morning of like comparisons, because I didn't watch it live, and I saw some photos, but someone did, a YouTuber did like side-by-sides of even like Big Ramy versus Ronnie. And then he did one of like Phil versus Brandon Curry, Phil versus Big Ramy.
Really? Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And he was doing these like, I guess, like as things were happening, because he'd even got the photos, did the comparisons, and made an assessment before the judging came out. So yeah, I don't know how much you caught. I only really, if I'm honest, saw the under 212 pound guys. So that's like John Jewett and Sean Clarida, however you say his name, unfortunately, the giant killer, the previous WNBF pro. I saw bits of that, and then I saw obviously like the open Mr. Olympia with Big Ramy taking it, and then I saw the classic guys. Didn't really keep my eye on too much else, so I don't know how much you saw, Pascal.
Oh, not that much either, because this is something that we've talked about just recently. I don't enjoy watching 8 hours of a stream of people posing. Don't. Right? Only then to see when the big guys are coming on or so. I rather watch the highlight reels. That's all I need to know then. And this is, of course, what I've done. And yeah, it was crazy to see Big Ramy's side chest shots. They were crazy. The legs, boy. And also the front shots. in besides the other people, when you just take a look at the quad size, that was ridiculous. And it wasn't just the size, he also brought the conditioning. And holy shit. But from the side shots, wow. I was very impressed with the side shots of especially his legs. Very crazy. And then I've seen like that Chris Bumstead and Big Ramy came together for a photo shoot. And it's unbelievable the difference in size between those two. Chris Bumstead literally looks like a natural athlete besides someone like Big Ramy. Crazy, right? Because if you just were to see someone like Chris Bumstead, you would think like, oh yeah, I mean, Mr. Olympia for the second time, crazy, he's big, yada, yada, yada. And then he stands next to Big Ramy and it's just like, he looks like a natural athlete.
Yeah. It's also crazy to me because I'd been looking at Brion, who has won the classic before, obviously our guy, Rough Diesel, Terrence, and then Chris Bumstead, and like I'd seen them all post photos and they all look insane. And when I just look at photos, I maybe wouldn't order them in the order that they won. And then when you see them on stage side by side, that's when everything clears up. Yeah. And it's like, okay, Chris, you really do have like this classic physique just nailed.
And also, it's always better to then watch video instead of just photos, because photos are just a momentarily caught thing, right? Whereas when it comes to videos, you can see, like, is it just like a glimpse moment that has been caught favorably for someone or unfavorably for someone else? There was this one guy, also classic physique. Oh, I can't recall his name. Very, very young guy, super shredded, but it really didn't come across like this on pictures. On the pictures, it even looked like as if he's super watery or didn't bring the conditioning, especially on his quads. But that was just the pictures. If you've seen him then pose with different pictures, or also especially with the video, you really saw that he had striated glutes, everything came out and stuff like that. It was just unfavorable catch in a single moment, right? And this is always something where then the keyboard warriors come out and bring up their judgments, where it's like, calm down. I mean, you are not sitting there. You're not a professional judge. So you can have your opinion. But I mean, we're speaking about the top physiques in the world. So they wouldn't be standing there if they don't have it, what it takes.
Yeah. I'll say and I remember saying this to you, I hadn't really ever looked at Brandon Curry's physique a whole lot. And this was the first time I really was looking at it. I was like, man, that his physique to me just looks so appealing. He just has such nice lines, and his smile, whatever, his stage presence is just so like, nice to see. So yeah, it's just Big Ramy just has the size, like you just can't take. I
mean, Brandon Curry, I think he very much in the front lat spread position.
Oh,
he brought more size in the lat spread than Big Ramy, for example. He had like a much wider wingspan, so to speak, and that is crazy to me. And that just shows how much muscle mass he is actually carrying and stuff.
Yeah, I think it was just his lower body was a little bit lacking compared. But yeah, it's just, I love actually watching that. But then it also reminded me, and I think because I've seen people like, why haven't they brought classic towards natural organizations? And I'm like, well, really? Because there is no big size difference. Like, if you're going to train for classic, I mean, you're still trying to maximize and be as big as you can. It's just maybe less conditioned, and then it's like, well,
and that's what the thing. Classic physique in natural bodybuilding, to me, doesn't really make sense. It doesn't.
I agree. Because really, like you said there was a big difference between Big Ramy and Chris Bumstead, but there's just not going to be between open bodybuilding and then classic. Like, it's maybe condition, maybe slightly posing, some lines and stuff, but posing. But other than that, the size differences, there's not going to be any. The classic guys could end up being bigger than the bodybuilders in some instances. So.
And of course, I mean, there are people that are very much made for classic physique. And also look very, very much like that in the natural realms. But the thing is, it's just like, I don't really think it makes much sense to have a category like this in natural bodybuilding, because you probably still need to get as lean as possible, try to get as big as possible, and then basically you're just a bodybuilder in a classic physique short with different poses.
I think someone like Andrew Chappelle comes to mind, where like he is quite classic, he poses quite classic. You can do that on the bodybuilding stage, or Elias, who I was working with, he was working towards some classic shows that were like untested, but he could do well hitting his classic shots within like a bodybuilding context. So yeah, it was nice to see that happen after a year of not much really happening. I guess all the shows like the BNBF got really pushed back. The UKDFBA actually feels like ages ago now, and it excites me for next year. And on that point, actually, after this deload, is that the start of prep?
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
What date is that?
I don't know. Somewhere next week. It's not. I don't. It's not. I don't know like I'm saying like it's starting on Monday.
How many days out?
yeah, exactly. I've moved away from this. It's just like I start when I start, and one day more or less at this point in time will not make that much of a difference.
Yeah.
So I will probably start after the Christmas days, I would say. Yeah.
Makes sense. It makes, I think I even said to you when my scale weight started rising a bit quickly, I was like, oh man, am I going to be like, and it's making me like, I'm itching also to like be starting prep, and I'll get some physique shots this week, and I'll get you to give me your point of view on them. I don't think it means I can't mass for another additional mass. I've certainly got at least one. It's whether or not I decide, do I want to push for two more, or maybe just kind of maintain for one of those?
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, you see that sticky ground where, and I think you've probably had this the last month, where you're like trying to embrace the mass, gain that last bit of size, but also know that you've got this cut coming in. Like, you don't want to push it too fast. Yeah. You're kind of like, oh.
This is exactly where I was as well. And in addition to that, I was training from at home. I had the feeling that everything feels heavier, doesn't really feel as productive. Then niggling aches, pains here and there, and that's why I thought like pushing it now doesn't really make sense to me. So rather more on the side of like maintenance rather than to be in a appropriate surplus. Still making sure that you are in a surplus, I would say, because you better make sure that you are, because otherwise you are already suffering from the negative consequences of being in a caloric deficit. This is something that you don't want to do too early, but still, taking things a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, but not as meticulous, at least for me here over the past couple of weeks now. And this, of course, sometimes bites you in the ass, but sometimes it's just very much needed as well.
Fast, efficient fat loss. Does that sound like music to your ears? The mini cut movement might just be for you. Mini cuts are like robbing the fat bank. You want to get in and out with as much fat as possible. In a short period of time, you could easily look to lose 6 to 12 pounds of fat. The mini cut movement is excellent. There's group support for extra accountability and also expert help within the group. We have educational videos to keep you on track along the way, and you get all your nutrition and training customized and individualized for you. So if that sounds of interest, get involved with the mini cut movement. It can be that psychological relief where actually you can really have relaxed. So then you kind of crave that dialing it in, and it's like, oh, this is new, this is fun, this is something I want to do. And I imagine this all plays into how you're feeling a little bit, in terms of we're so driven to always want to be moving forward, and when we really like let things cool off, it feels just something feels off about it.
Yeah.
And then but it allows you that break to charge forward again. So yeah, that's cool, that's exciting. And it's going to be exciting also, like doing this process together. I just think, and we know more now, and everything from posing to peak weeks to kind of nutritional periodization towards stage is just going to be that much better again, and it's going to be exciting and fun. And I can't wait to kind of reveal what's kind of hiding underneath in that sense and share that process.
Neither can I, to be honest. And I just also need a little bit more of, once again, a purpose. We've talked about it. It's not that I need a specific goal or so, but it's nice at times to have like a specific thing to work towards too. That's not the be-all, end-all, but I think that, I'm very much looking forward to that as well. Totally.
Even for me, like, it's 4 years since I last competed now, basically.
Crazy. That went so long. Fast.
Yeah, the time did go fast. It's crazy. And for you, it's like you've attempted a few times and got pretty close. And it's just like, I mean, you've been certainly below 10% body fat. Yeah. You just haven't quite been towards the nitty gritty, which is probably just as well, because if you got there and then didn't compete, it's like, well, that'd be annoying. So that for you, I can just see it's like, I don't know, any goal, if you've kind of been driving towards it many times, almost like started a process, and then when you have to pull back because of life, it's just like, fuck.
Yeah.
So it's like, hopefully no Corona type 2 next year or something.
One of the vlogs that I recently released publicly is like 1 year ago, and I was watching that, and I was saying like, there's no way in hell that I won't make it to stage unless something severe is happening. So I jinxed it. Then the most severe thing is actually happening, or one of the most severe things.
It's going to be surreal watching those vlogs that we're slowly releasing as like everything transpires, and then there's training from home, and then flipping it in and out. But it's similar to here. Women are on the kind of, I know you said you haven't got any kind of light at the end of the tunnel. We've been told there's a review on the 30th of January, I think, here. No, wait, maybe I've got that wrong. No, 30th of December, there's a review, I think even. I can't see them opening up tier 4 areas. And if anything, with what's happening over Christmas and the number of people that will be not following rules anyway, I think there's going to be another nationwide lockdown, unfortunately, in the UK.
And it's so unfortunate that people, and how should I phrase it? Because of course that will go against some of the listeners, I think, but I find it not appropriate to then go out just because you want to spend time with your family or your parents. I know where this is coming from. I can see why, right? But I think that one Christmas holiday, we can probably all pull back just a little bit, or put one step back again, just to perhaps get it over more quickly and perhaps even help other people staying alive. All right, but so many people are just like adamant about still visiting or getting together with other people, and
I know
it's frustrating because it just makes it continue these lockdowns for longer, and it doesn't make things any better anytime soon.
Yeah, I get it from like a small business owner perspective and things, trying to maybe not following every rule because you need to make it like a living and you have to live. And I guess both of us are very blessed. We can work from home and we're in a position where that's not like such an issue for us. But to do it for it's basically selfish reasons, just to see friends and family, especially if you aren't kind of, I don't know, living home alone and you're going to be alone for Christmas. If you have like your family with you and you're going to go visit, I don't know, 6 other members of your family, and it's really going to start spreading. Yeah, that's when you're kind of like, oh, guys, let's kind of help one another here, but it will be what it will be.
Even if you don't believe in the COVID virus or whatever, and the entire thing just being a, I don't know, governmental hoax. So I don't know, whatever you believe is the case, and you don't believe in wearing masks or having social distancing, I think still you can have your beliefs, but obliging to some of the rules and guidelines, I think that what's wrong with that? Especially when you can have it over quicker than later. But this is always where people can't really have the delayed gratification. People are so bad at that, right? It's the same thing with, I can give you $50 here today, or I give you $100 in 2 months from now. What is it that you're choosing? And the majority of people pick the $50 because they have it now, right? And that's the same thing. I think things would be way better if the vast majority of people would just like oblige to the rules for just a minimum amount of time. Then we can go perhaps back to a little bit more of a normal way. And then perhaps another lockdown, but instead of it being 3 months long, perhaps it's only like 2 or 3 weeks.
I think it's so hard. It's such a hard thing to navigate. It's so hard. And yeah, the only thing I can think of is people struggle with it now, particularly because it's like, oh, we have some freedom now. And when we've had freedom before and then it's been taken away. And so I'm going to make the most out of my freedom now, or whatever it is. So it's like, it's just for me, I almost wish we didn't have those 3 weeks back in gyms and open up everything. It almost just felt like, oh, we're going to open up things to boost the economy a little bit or whatever. And then we're going to lock you back down. And it's like, well, I just would have preferred you to extend that 3 weeks and then we'd be open or whatever now, rather than like, I don't know, like it's like you get a little taster and then they take it away. Taster, take it away. Oh
boy.
So yeah. Anyway,
in and out game.
That is what it is. I'm just thankful. I'm so thankful that I invested in like a bunch of kit for the gym early on, because if I have, like I spoke to you, I have like some clients who started up literally because the gym's open and they felt like they weren't going to close again. It's like they have nothing at home. And I'm like, we can make something work, but it's not so, I mean, it's a pain in the ass when you've got kit and like, let alone when you haven't got anything.
I'm still looking out for like an incline bench that you can, an adjustable bench that also then has an attachment in front for leg curls and leg extensions. But these things are sold out everywhere. And the ones that are looking like decent, you can't get your hands on those at all.
Crazy. I saw something, I think it got advertised to me on like Instagram. It was like something you can hook on your leg and then you can attach a dumbbell to it. So you can basically, you can hook weights to your legs and you can do like knee extensions because you can put it on the front and the weight's like attached to you, and then you like do standing leg curls because the weight's just attached to you. Yeah, it was like some invention that someone made where, you could just put it around your ankle and it strap weights to you. So I was like, man, that would be pretty cool. That would be handy.
I think there are so many things that we don't even think about. Like, I don't know, that cable pulley station that you can attach to a wall or so, right?
I looked at
already
those.
Be great for someone like me, because I have not any kind of pulley machine or cable machine at home. And I do appreciate cables. And this is echt, I mean, over time, I was in the past, I was always like very adamant of just doing compound lifts. I know the time when I was recovering from my hip surgery, I do remember like I was going to the gym the day after my release of the hospital, and I was doing so much with dumbbells, barbells, and it was a pain in the ass because I had to carry the weight to the bench on just like one foot because I couldn't put any kind of pressure on my other leg, and then getting into position. It was a pain in the ass because I was convinced that training with machines is something that is not feasible for me.
So much more convenient. Just sit in that chest machine.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Oh dear.
I wish I would have known better. But
I don't know if you saw my belt squat set-up. I found a new way of doing belt squats.
No.
So I basically, it's hard to describe actually. I need my rack for it, and it's using the barbell. So you basically put the safeties up high one side and lower the other side, and then you hook your belt round like the end of the barbell, and then you can come out and do like belt squats with the barbell. That just felt so much better than on my cable machine. The cable machine belt squats just were awkward, awkward. And the weight, because it's pulling you forward, it just feels so unnatural and puts quite a bit of pressure on that lower back area, even though it's not kind of axial loading. So and
the range of motion is all right.
The range of motion is actually okay. If you can set up the belt so it's like the hoop, there's not much hoop, so you can like clip it closer, so it's quite close to your body. You can get pretty deep with it. So I'm just scared about something falling or breaking when I'm doing it. I'm just like, okay.
That's always the risk with those constructions that you've done yourself.
Yeah, so I just have to make sure Ada's out of the room. But then if I'm in here and I'm training and I'm making noise, she's just outside like, what's going on in there? Barking and going crazy. I'm just like, fuck's sake. Oh dear. But yeah, that was fun.
Cool. Should we go over to questions?
Yes. So do you remember where we get to Brandon's question?
No.
Let's start with Brandon because he is our guy. So Brandon has asked, when you're cutting and carbs and food intake are getting lower. Oh no, did we answer this one? I feel like we may have. Okay.
No.
Let me go through it. When you are cutting and carbs/food intake.
Steve, do you want to start again?
Carbs and food intake are getting lower. What have you personally found is your setup sweet spot of keeping carbs/food closer to the training window for performance versus still keeping more in later in the day to help relax/satiate you in hopes of maybe being less stressed/get better sleep? All these slashes are really confusing me.
I have to reread it again. I don't know if you have a quick answer for that.
So,
and in the meanwhile, I'm rereading it again.
I think the reason I thought we'd already answered this is because I had read it beforehand, because if I ever recognize a name that's asking a question, and because I coached Brandon for a period of time, and I remember reading it and thinking, I don't think I've ever really thought about that closely enough. I tend to just prioritize carbohydrates around the working window and then have less later in the day. So, and I don't think I've ever really truly experienced I haven't needed to watch it so closely that I have a great answer for this. I just tend to have prioritization of carbs around the training window, and then later in the day, in contest prep, I was having for a while I was having oats with casein pudding on top before bed, and then that moved towards being oats with, it was like cauliflower oats before bed with the casein pudding, and then it moved to just the casein pudding. So I would
then it just moved to cauliflower.
to cauliflower. So that evening meal started, that's where I took carbs from, rather than taking it from around the training window, just because mostly theoretically that's going to support my training best. I can't say I removed carbs there and put them before bed and found my sleep was better and my training was better. I don't know if you have any better answers than that.
Not really. The only thing that I would say is, first and foremost, I don't experience it myself. Simply because, let me just turn it off very quickly. I'm training early in the morning, so I don't structure the carbs around my workout, and I never felt that it impacted my performance significantly. It could be that when you're deep in, or not just it could be, it's very likely that when you're deep in a contest prep, super lean, that then the carbs become more important to be around your workout, to fuel your workouts, to then maintain the muscle mass, because you're still able to perform your very best in that situation. Other than that, I think it's one of those things where I would say what may be optimal on paper doesn't necessarily mean that it's optimal for you and your lifestyle and your personal preferences. Sometimes people make the mistake that they want to have it one way, but rather they should have it another way. So let's say the example with the carbs around a workout. Some people are then putting all of their carbs or most of the carbs around the workout, and that leaves them very hungry, very food focused at the end of the day or so. And what's that good for when you are then in a cutting phase and you're optimizing one thing just to make one other thing more of a suffering and unsustainable approach? We then need to prioritize what's more important, and maybe we can figure out a way that suits both scenarios. So where we are performing our very best because we're adding some carbohydrates there, while also not running into the issue of then feeling hungrier later in the day. But if not, then we have to come up with a prioritization of what's more important for you. Is it a little bit of suffering in the evening? Is that all right? Or do you need to be, satiated in the evening, because otherwise your sleep is massively impacted. You are getting massive sleep deprivation then, which then causes more stress, and thus the performance is also going down, even though that you are fueling yourself with carbs around the window. So sometimes it's not about what is optimal on paper. In that scenario, it's like, okay, putting the carbs around the workout to fuel the workouts. Perhaps it's the other way around then. And I think that I've seen it so often with people thinking that they need to do XYZ because that's what the majority of people are doing, and that's what they heard leads to the best outcome, but perhaps it doesn't for you because it's unsustainable for you and takes away on other aspects as well. What's your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I think that this answer has got to be individualized to the person. If you're in a position where you are leaner, where you have been dieting a while, you're going to have less fuel for your training, but also your sleep could be negatively impacted by being in a dieted state. And so it's something, I guess, to play around with. And if I was to pick, because on paper you'd think, okay, when are carbs going to be most important in that case? You'd be like probably pre-workout to top off glycogen stores for training performance. But that's assuming sleep quality isn't negatively impacted by being hungry or for whatever reason at night, because that's then probably more important, because sleep quality probably trumps everything in that case. And you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul in that case. Yeah. And it's like you have to experiment for yourself. For me personally, like I said, I think if I get that big enough protein feeding before bed, maybe like a fairly like large salad. I would always have like salmon steak and like a large salad, and then I'd have like casein pudding before bed. If I do that and I'm not training first thing, then I can like save my carbs to put around my training. I tend to have found that to work for me, but it might not be the same for everyone, like you said.
Yeah. And maybe you just need to figure out a way that, I don't know, satisfies you, satiates you by the end of the day without perhaps a lot of carbohydrates. Perhaps there is something like, for example, you brought up the example with the casein pudding. At first it was with oats, then oats with cauliflower to save some calories, and then by the end it was only the pudding itself. But it caused you to always have that volume as well, satiate you at the end of the day. It's just like, playing a little bit around, being flexible and being creative. And this is also where the skill of dieting comes into play, because you figure out over time small little hacks and tricks, playing with volume, manipulating certain foods in order for you to stay more satiated throughout the day or throughout the night. And this is a great skill to have.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
To your point, actually, I want to highlight it because I definitely, in my contest prep last time, sacrificed my... I probably created more stress by trying to do what was optimal on paper for myself. So I was hungry, because post-workout, I would have, I think I eventually moved to like rice cakes and egg whites. And that's not a filling meal. That like digests super quick. And that's part of the reason for a post-workout. You kind of want that. But for a diet, that is not fun, because then you're kind of very hungry soon after. And I remember like eating all this, eating cereals and things around my workout, because I was like, I want these quick digesting carbs because quote unquote optimal on paper. But it just left me a bit stressed the rest of the day. Whereas when I change things like in a mini cut, I wouldn't do that. And I'd be like, I'm actually just going to have a decent bowl of oats post-workout rather than having like these like Rice Krispies or something. Yeah. That satiated me way better. I didn't notice the knock-on effect on any kind of performance outcomes. And so, I think sometimes you have to take a step back from what you see like, is meant to be the best thing on paper.
Yeah, in short, sometimes you just have to pick the lesser evil and pick your battle, basically. Yeah. Sometimes no scenario is the optimal scenario, but one perhaps is better than the other.
Yeah. Next question.
Yep.
I'm going to go to Emre Cars. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's how you'd say that name, but I like Emre. Sounds cool. Do you think pressing exercises are even are a necessity, such as the overhead press, when it comes to optimizing shoulder gains? The front delts are overdeveloped in most cases anyways. The rear delts don't get hit with pressing movements, and you can isolate and hit the side delts better with lateral raise variations. Do you need pressing movements unless you are a pro or very advanced?
I don't even think that a pro or very advanced person does need them. I think that you can develop quite very impressive shoulders without any kind of overhead pressing. In my opinion, I would even go as far in saying that overhead pressing causes more for the triceps than for the shoulders itself. While yes, I can do variations as well where I feel my delts being on fire, but this is also something that I can do for less systemic fatigue and less perhaps putting yourself in a suboptimal position and with more volume with other exercises. So I can just like do so many dumbbell lateral raises and lateral raise variations, maybe also some upright rows, without being systemically fatigued at all, and accumulate a lot of volume and a lot of metabolic stress in that area without frying myself and without perhaps also putting too much strain on the elbows as well, on the triceps as well. So I personally, and I think that you are the same, I don't think that overhead pressing is something that people need to have in their program. I can see a validity for something like, for example, female athletes, especially bikini athletes, who don't really need or have in general too many pressing movements in their program. Then you can, of course, substitute that systemic fatigue and the fatigue accumulation that is not in their program, such as bench press. You can easily then substitute it with something like overhead press or so, right? But other than that, most of the time for non-female competitors, I hardly ever have that in. Sometimes, yeah, also for, mostly just for female competitors, I have to say. But other than that, I think that other exercises are probably better suited for that due to the stimulus to fatigue ratio.
That is basically my exact answer. I feel like I've spoken about this loads on Instagram because people ask this sort of question all the time. And you basically said it exactly the way I said. It's not something I think is a necessity. I could almost see it being a negative, especially the more advanced you are, because you really need to optimize stimulus to fatigue ratio. And unfortunately, it's not one of those movements that tends to have the best. So yeah, it's something I very much don't tend to program, more so for females maybe, and more so for guys who really love it. And I tend to sometimes put it in for those ones who love it in like a primer phase where I'm just like, man, let's just do some low volume like overhead pressing. It's not going to really, you're not worried about it costing something else in that scenario. So yeah, I also have a personal bias like against overhead press because I've always been shit at it and I really don't enjoy that movement.
What was the highest weight that you've ever moved?
Fuck, I don't even know, like 40 kilos or something. Okay. I don't even know. No, maybe 60 I did for a few reps, but like people fuck up that form all the time. They let their butt kind of come right over the arch. They turn it into a high incline press.
That like dipping movement where it's like they come across their eyes and then all of a sudden it's just like a bouncing movement from there on onwards.
Yeah, I just fuck overhead press. Right, so we have a question from Kid Ludovic, and they've asked, "Hi guys, and Merry Christmas to you all. My question for this week comes from my training where I wasn't feeling so good, so decided to lower the weight. Afterward, I was surprised to see that the total volume was in fact higher due to the high number of repetitions. For example, I am currently benching 4 for a set of 9, so the volume was this, and they're equating kind of volume load, so they're doing sets times reps times load, and this time I chose to use 70, but the rep range was higher. What do you think is most efficient for hypertrophy? For me, if the volume is lower, I feel the first example is much harder." So basically, volume load for hypertrophy, how is this useful for kind of knowing which would be better in such a scenario for hypertrophy? 4 times a lower repetition at a higher weight for less volume load, or 4 sets at a higher repetition with a lower load but more volume load? Which one would be better for hypertrophy?
I would be very curious to hear also his relative intensity. I would assume that it was the same though, because he didn't really specifically talk about it. When it comes to volume load, I'm always a little bit, I don't like to really use it, to be honest, because if you want to, you can really ramp it up. And then it's a matter of like, have you just done it to ramp up the volume load, but the volume that you've been doing was just like pure junk, but you didn't really feel any kind of significant difference? And in it for itself, I don't think it's a useful metric for bodybuilding, because it doesn't really tell you much about the mind-muscle connection, the metabolic disruption, the soreness, the pumps that you've experienced, etc., right? And even if it's then the same movement with the same volume load, with the tonnage that you're then tracking, and you have done significantly more, I think, yeah, probably you have induced a little bit of a higher hypertrophic stimulus, but how much? I can't tell. And I don't think that it makes that much of a difference, because we also know that adding just like one set more isn't equating to a lot of further additional hypertrophy, but the cost that comes along with that, so fatigue accumulation, stress on connective tissue, is much higher than as well. With each and every additional volume that you're doing, you're just inducing a lot of fatigue and a lot of stress as well. And this always comes at the cost of diminishing returns, not just in an acute sense, but more so over the long term. So that's why if you always were to chase just the tonnage, then you're missing a lot of the other variables that are very much important. And you can easily put yourself into the ground because you're only chasing then the tonnage without focusing on these other aspects as well. And I think it's much, much more important to have just a quality training session instead of chasing the total amount of volume that you are doing. The goal isn't volume per se. The goal is to induce the highest amount of hypertrophic stimulus as possible. And that doesn't mean that it's always the highest amount of tonnage or volume that you are doing in a single session.
Yeah, I think you've laid it out there nicely in terms of like volume load isn't something I ever tend to focus on. I know I used to, and I don't know if we had it in the spreadsheets when you started, Pascal. I used to have like sets times reps, and then I'd have sets times. I'd have like volume load in there. I'd have sets times reps.
I still have it, but I never. So it's hidden, right? And I never use it anymore. Never use it anymore. This is the same. Oh, sorry. To go off on a tangent here slightly. I've made a presentation on how to build your own spreadsheet, right? And it's very straightforward and very simplistic in the way it's set up. Because, and I was even saying there, you have to figure out what data is important to you, and whether you are actually doing something with the data. And I found out that I never used the data anyway, because I didn't really find it valuable and helpful, especially because the majority of people who are coming to us, you can take care of so many other things first that then determine the stimulus and just the outcome. And that is fixing the technique, making sure that the mind-muscle connection is appropriately, making sure that the intensity is there. And these things take a long time to perfectionize. And then the other variables don't really tell you much, even on a progressive manner, right? Even if you are then progressing on a weekly basis in regards to load, does it really tell you that you're getting stronger or that you're progressing? No, it only tells you that a number is going up. But if that number goes up for the cost of sacrificing form and technique or so, right? It's not worth a lot. And that's why I rather than focus on these other things. And once they are in check, which sometimes I never even get to that point with some athletes, and sometimes it just takes a freaking long time. But once these things are in check, then you can start to look at other data points that then can tell you a story, a true story basically, and not just a story that is kind of confirmation bias. You're just looking for a number that tells you something, but it's not a true reflection of what is actually going on.
Yeah, I think volume load got more, it came from like the strength circles and then got probably misapplied towards hypertrophy. And when we're considering hypertrophy, I don't know when this article came out, but it's been a while that hard sets have been like a better gauge probably for hypertrophy. I know it was on Stronger by Science, their website. It wasn't actually by Greg, but it was by someone else. Kind of came up with the concept of hard sets. And that's kind of basically, you have a relative intensity of 4 reps in reserve or less, and you're working within the 5 to 30 repetition range. And as long as you work in that, it seems that no matter what you do, set per set basis, it's kind of equivalent hypertrophy. So it doesn't matter if the volume load's higher or whatever it might be. But so you're doing 4 sets within that range at the same relative intensity for both of these examples. So you might think your hypertrophy is going to be very similar. And I would guess it's very, very similar. The only thing I think is interesting is they mentioned that the 4x9 was much harder than the 4x18. And so you might argue, okay, so the 4x18, if it is set by set, as hypertrophic as one another, maybe you want to do more of the 4x18 because you're finding that less fatiguing for arguably as much stimulus. But you mentioned some things that I think are important is how disrupted did you feel? Where was the mind muscle connection? How was the pump? Because it might be that the 4x18, you're just like I just felt like, I don't know, nothing much happened. The next day, I didn't really feel anything. Whereas the 4x9, you could have been like, oh man, my chest was really firing. The next day, I felt like I was quite sore in that muscle group. So, okay, maybe that was a bit more disruptive for you. So maybe you have to do more sets of the higher repetition work to get the equivalent hypertrophy result from the lower. So yeah, that's my only additional thoughts.
Yeah.
Did you Google what the article was?
No.
Oh, I thought you were then. But that, I think most people now are using like hard sets, because I know for a while I was doing sets by reps, and then because I wanted to achieve, I can't remember what it was per week, like 70 to 100 repetitions for a muscle group per week, and that was like based off worm bonds, like meta-analysis. But there's been so many good studies coming out now that are like, let's just use sets based off like this rule. So I think that is probably more appropriate.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool. So we got time. Yeah, we got time for another one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes. Cool. So let's go for Makoto Tomizawa.
We already answered that question in
one.
a different episode. I think that Makoto just thought that we skipped his question.
We didn't. We have answered that. So Darko Stankovic has asked, do you find top set and back off sets useful? Seems like everyone's feedback is that the lightweight after the top set feels even lighter on this approach.
Yeah, funny enough, I just had today one of my athletes asking for top sets and back off sets. And my answer is, first and foremost, listen to, I think, one of the episodes that we've done recently. I think Mike Isserter was even asked that question. And I can't really recall what he was saying, but I like to remember that it was good. But my personal opinion is that a top set and a back off set is probably not something that I would aim for, simply because, and here's my rationale for that, you're focusing too much on load on the bar, which I would say is not as important for something like hypertrophy in the short term as something like overall mind-muscle connection, the things that we just talked about as well. Once a minimum threshold of intensity is met, I think that volume is probably more important. But this, of course, comes under the premise that form, execution, technique, the quality of a set is in check as well. So when you're then doing something like a top set, then you have like one set where you're able to induce a high level of hypertrophic stimulus, but then the next one, you can't really fire as many motor units any longer because you already fatigued yourself so much. And why do you need a drop-down set? Because you probably already went too far with that first set. It's inducing too much fatigue overall, in my opinion, most of the time, for little return. You're basically burning yourself out at the beginning of a workout or at the beginning of an exercise, which then hinders you to continue adding more volume or more qualitative sets afterwards. And this is, I think, not the most optimal approach and not the best use of your time if you got the time in the gym. I can see a rationale for that when it comes to when you're super strong and one exercise is highly metabolically disruptive for you. So let's say you are very strong at back squats and that first set is already causing so much fatigue that the next set would be suboptimal and you would fall drastically in the repetitions that you're able to accomplish. I could see a rationale for that, then still induce or get some more volume in with that same exercise. But other than that, I would just always prefer the method of just like going a little bit lighter in regards to load and then adding up. And then we can go back to something like the tonnage thing. Because I think it's probably better to have something like, I would say, let's say 100 kilograms for 4 sets for 10 repetitions, then 110 kilograms for only 3 sets for only 8 repetitions or so. And the difference between those isn't super huge, so each and every single repetition that you're inducing isn't adding a lot of volume, right, due to just the load differences. But I think that when you're then adding another set, it already puts you in quite a different ballpark when it comes to the added volume or so. Overall, though, just to conclude and keep it short. I think it adds too much fatigue in a single session in an acute sense. It doesn't really add too much more hypertrophy, but it comes once again also here at a very high cost, and that is just like overall fatigue accumulation, which then hinders you to probably get more out of a session, more out of an exercise, and basically reduces the amount of hypertrophic stimulus that you can put towards your body in one single session. That doesn't mean that it can't be used. It's not valuable at times, because I very much see that it can be valuable, especially for very strong individuals. But for the vast majority of people, I don't think that it's a good use of your time and your energy.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, a lot of the time it's used is because people want an ego lift in there and they want to destroy themselves on a set. And therefore, they are forced to have to lighten the load to accumulate any sort of volume. Whereas you mentioned there's probably a better place to be where you accumulate good quality volume without destroying yourself in the first place, because that can lead to problems in itself. And just to mention something I use, and you might use these as well, Pascal's, I differentiate it calling it a down set, in that when there's lots of sets within a rep range for a muscle group and reps are starting to drop below like 5, or maybe it's just getting that you're finding that the weight is just feeling very heavy, but you can do with more sets, and the stimulus to fatigue ratio could be better if you drop the load for a little bit and continue to add another set there. Those are some scenarios I might auto-regulate a down set. For example, I was doing straight leg deadlifts and I knew I could benefit from a 4th set, but if I kept the weight the same, my reps would drop to like 4 or 3, and that would have just been a crummy set for hypertrophy. So I dropped the load by 15% and I did another set, which was like 8 reps or something, which felt fantastic. And I think that can work well. And the only other way I use down sets is normally transitioning from like mesocycle 1 or 2 to 3, mesocycle 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or something, where we've been coming out of like a low volume primer phase. So I've been focusing more on the heavier work because the person's really sensitized and can do well with that kind of repetition range. But into next mesocycle, maybe that heavy work is now the stimulus to fatigue ratio is dropping off, and I want to focus on a slightly higher repetition range for the majority of the time in that mesocycle. So it might be that I want to focus more on the 10 to 15 rep range. Rather than adding a new exercise after, say, a back squat, it might be that I do like 2 top sets, or you could call them top sets, like 5 to 10 reps, and then 2 or 1 down set at like a 10 to 20% reduction of load, because that is just a better stimulus to fatigue ratio using that absolute intensity, or that rep range. And I have found people they tend to love those down sets. They're like, oh man, after the heavy stuff, I kind of feel like it potentiates those down sets. And I think that's maybe a more productive way than like the heavy top and the like then 1 back off set or whatever people are calling it.
Maybe this is also something that Darko is referring to, because he says that the lighter set, or after the drop, it feels even lighter on this approach. And yeah, I mean, you brought up very good points there. And I think that this is also context dependent. So if you have like limited equipment, for example, at home, and you can't do that many exercises, then of course, I think that instead of jumping around and making some kind of exercises work that you don't really feel, perhaps just another down set or couple of down sets are the way to go. Also something that I like in a metabolite block as well, to really then have like an all-outer set where it's like, okay, you do your normal work and then you go for the last set that is then being taken all the way to failure, perhaps even in a slightly higher repetition range, to really just accumulate a little bit more metabolites as well. And also, of course, it's like you said, if you are someone who is accumulating a lot of fatigue very quickly, but you need a little bit more volume in order to get the most amount of hypertrophic stimulus. Most of the time, this is something that you can see, for example, in very heavy, very, very strong individuals, but also sometimes even in elderly folks who don't really have the capacity and actually going too heavy too frequently any longer, because it puts too much strain on their joints, connective tissues, but also where the fatigue accumulation is just so rapidly that they have to then go with a lighter set or so to just get a little bit more volume in because it's required or necessary. So once again, there are definitely scenarios where I could see the benefit of adding something like this, but the way the vast majority of people are promoting it, of like having one heavy top set and one down set, especially for people who aren't really super strong, and that most of the time applies to a lot of natural lifters, I don't think that it's the best, once again, the best way to go about it. If you are able to squat 300 kilograms, sure thing. One heavy set of that with one down set of like 240 or so is probably enough of a stimulus overall to then just leave it at that. But if you're only squatting with 120 kilograms with good form,
yeah, I'm not sure that's going to be the most optimal way to grow muscle there. Maybe not a bad strength program in some ways. Probably still not the best strength program, actually. Cool. Is that time? Yeah, I think we're on time.
Yeah.
Do we have a win? We don't have a winner to pick, do we?
No. Again, sorry, guys.
It's because we thought we weren't going to be able to do this episode. That's my bad,
in the next year, we are going to pick some more winners. That's for sure. That's for sure.
I know the last winner really appreciated Nikias. Is that the right way to say his name? So yeah, it's great to see. And I guess, again, thank you guys for supporting us. Thank you for listening as always. Absolutely. And I'm going to do Pascal's job because I'm normally always forgetting this. Do remember, if you're not subscribed, do subscribe to the channel. Click the notification button. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a comment. You'll be talking to Jess probably in the comment section there. So enjoy that chat, and we'll catch you soon.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge, and I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.